Hi, everybody. Today we have Mike Garcia here, who's a
Yep.
syntropic farmer from Florida. He's got a farm called Ever Oak Farm, and he manages an intensive market garden amidst a syntropic agroforestry system. Also, you have a poultry operation, and you sell some fruits and vegetables, and you also do a bit of consulting and designing around the area. And
Yep.
yeah, I think you're really a good person to dive into like all the logistics of like how you run your operation and all. So it'd be really cool to really dive into that with you. And
Yeah.
do you want to add anything to this very short intro I gave you there?
Yeah, let me go ahead and elaborate more about what else we do. So yeah, we're located in Central Florida. We're in Orlando, literally 10 minutes outside from the downtown area. So we're pretty urban. We're on a 3 acre lot. About 2.5 acres is actually in production. Half an acre is annual vegetables, and then the rest are our perennial agroforestry systems, where we have poultry integrated with all of our fruit. Um, we primarily our main outlet and our main way we generate revenue here on the farm is through our CSA. For those who don't know what CSA is, community supported agriculture. We typically allow 80 fruits and veggie shares, 40 chicken shares, and then about to bump it up to about 15 egg shares. So all in all, right now we're sitting at 93 CSA members, and that's a mix of people with chicken and veggie shares and whatnot. We also sell a little bit to restaurants. Yeah, the idea is to have a diverse farm. So I have all these diverse operations and diverse crops and keeping it as diverse as possible because I'm a big believer of diversity builds resilience. So not only in the way we plant our systems, but also how we make it economically viable and having these different enterprises, which we can get more details later in the conversation about what we get into.
Hmm.
We also are certified naturally grown on our fruits and veggies. For those who don't know, it's an organization here in the United States that's operates under the same standards as the USDA organic, but without the bureaucrats of the USDA. It's an amazing grassroots organization here, just an alternative for farms that do direct to consumer sales, and in the sense of my context. So that's another organization or certification that we're part of. And yeah, we've been around for this is our seventh season. We're getting ready to wrap up our seventh season here. I will say I did not always practice agroforestry. Agroforestry came a little bit in a couple years after I came onto the property. My background's originally in the culinary arts. I was actually working towards becoming a chef before I got into farming, and all my farming ventures have actually been me self-taught, reading books, watching YouTube videos, Google search consistently, and just diving into it. Through my culinary career, a couple years within, I started questioning our whole entire food system and was very fascinated of how agriculture works and how our food, um, how our food system operates and the complexity there is that goes into it and all the different forms of agriculture. So I started picking up backyard gardening in 2012. Started a little 4 foot by 8 foot garden bed in my downtown home at the time that I was leasing. And yeah, then over the years it just kept growing. I became more passionate about growing than I did with cooking. And that's why I decided to make the leap and I dove deep into market gardening, and especially urban market gardening and doing the multi-plot things. I was also very deep into permaculture. I had a whole food forest at the time, a very not too,
Hmm.
it was pretty productive permaculture type food for us, very influenced by that. Ripped it down and got into market gardening and just needed something more viable that I could actually bust out a volume of veggies to bring to market. Which then landed into where I'm at now, a few years after that. We established Ever back in 2019. I'm still on lease land, so the 3 acres I'm on is actually lease. I have an amazing relationship with my landlord. People also make the comments like, man, you have these elaborate perennial systems that you're not really going to see the fruition until years later. You feel comfortable with that? I'm like, I definitely feel comfortable with that. And at the end of the day, it's like even if it's here for 2 or 5 years, at least it's going to be a little bit better. I'm going to leave this place better than what it was left to me. And I think that's the idea, is to always leave this place, wherever you leave, to leave it better than it was prior. And it never hurts to plant a tree.
No, it
So
doesn't.
it's only gonna it just makes everything much better. But yeah, that's a long intro there.
No, that's
But
pretty good. That
yeah,
explains
yeah,
kind of your path and all that. That's cool. And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, my first question I always ask is like, what made you actually go into syntropic agroforestry?
Oh man. So yeah. So when I came into, like I told you, I got into permaculture, but permaculture, there was a lot of flaws in those design. I eventually learned what permaculture really is, and I think it's a way of it's more of a design, not a little bit of a design framework, and having like what's a good word to describe it? It's gives you the tools and research of be able to preserve, like to look through the lens like a different way and to go through these different obstacles. But you never see a very productive permaculture farm. So I always abandoned that, but I still hold a lot of the principles with me, especially like people care, earth care, and some of the other principles that go along with it. I think it's a way of life. That's where I was going. Permaculture is a way of life and way of being. And then getting into market gardening, I was like, man, this is great. So just classic, simple, organic, biointensive market gardening, a lot of compost, bringing in compost, straight tight rolls, high turnover rotation. So when I came into this land here where I'm at, I was very open and exposed. And I was like, man, there needs to be another option out there. And like I wanted to incorporate more perennials, and a buddy of mine back in 2020 told me, started talking to me about syntropic agroforestry. I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. I actually originally went down the whole entire, watched a lot of the Agroforestry Academy guys on YouTube and started there. And I was like, oh man, this is the answer. I just love the practicality of agroforestry, of the linear planting, the high density linear plantings, and doing this. So then I actually started retrofitting my whole entire farm. It's like, how can I retrofit this into where I'm at now? And especially having this idea of going beyond sustainability and not having to rely on a tremendous amount of external inputs. So there was a lot of beautiful things that I going through this journey of Syntropy, and even going down on a spiritual aspect of it, because it became more than just growing food in a forest. It's like there's a lot of, I feel like, internal stuff you kind of go deeper into, and look into something beyond yourself. Um, Especially if you dive deeper into the taos of the comprehension of life and syntropy. And yeah, I felt like this is the solution. This is literally earned. I felt like really broke the code and or consolidated or made it more digestible to be able to learn these principles and techniques that made it practical on a level. So it's cool to see a lot of these practitioners kind of learn this and refining his process to fit it into many different contexts. And that's also what I love too, because it just gives you a general frameworks. Like once you learn techniques and principles, it can be applicable anywhere in the world, which is the great thing about it. I feel like some people are like, oh, that only works in the tropics, subtropics. I'm like, no, there's so many folks now doing in temperate climates and all different parts of and different types of temperate climates. It's just understanding how our earth functions and how ecology functions, and using that to our advantage to wherever it may be. Um, so going through all these rabbit holes of syntropy and trying to learn every bit of it, connecting with practitioners around the world, and accelerating. I've never had a chance to actually visit some elaborate systems. I've only lived and learned from being on the computer and just talking to other practitioners. Um, and it's nice that it's how accessible it is now, more so than what it was, what, 6, 7 years ago. Like there's more information out there now on syntropic agroforestry than there is, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I
a few years
remember
ago.
even me
Yeah.
starting 4 years ago. I remember there was very little available, and I remember people
Mm,
telling me like, I had this interview with Joshua Anderson,
yeah.
a friend of yours, and
Yep.
he was telling me that back then when he started about 15 years ago, if I'm not wrong,
Mhm.
there was only videos in Portuguese, so he had to like
Yep.
translate everything basically. And I felt like when I started as well, like there was very little available, but now there's loads of different
Loads of
videos
content.
about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot more content. It's like exponential. Every year there's more. So
Yep.
it's this kind of thing really helps get started much more
Yeah.
easily these days.
And I also, yeah, and I love that people are showing it in different climates and different contexts as well. Because nature's never in the box. And it's nice to see these techniques being applicable to many different things. Um, but yeah, Syntropy, I feel like is definitely the answer to our agricultural food system. And yeah, it's what I love because it really emphasized management and management being that big principle. And I think that's where, like, if you go into permaculture, you don't ever talk too much about management. It's that those guys are always like set it and forget it. But if you think about it, nature is never stagnant. It's never set it, forget it. There's certain animals that are always interacting in these ecosystems, and that we have to be those animals that interacted within the ecosystem that we're planting to be able to accelerate these things forward into succession and to whatever we needed to manage and navigate it to the context that we needed to be. But yeah, man, so kind of drifted a little bit from the question.
Oh, it's totally fine. I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's this drifting allowed here.
Yeah.
I think this
Yeah.
is where the most interesting conversations end up, and it's true. Like this is something also really cool to talk about. Like the fact that it's true that in permaculture, a lot of people just don't even speak about pruning. They're like
Yep.
set and forget. And you have, for example, the Miyawaki approach. It's like, oh, after 2 years, you don't need to take care of it. You know, it's like everything's gonna like, take care of itself. But I have a
No.
Miyawaki planted. It's like 4 years old, and I still need to do plenty of weeding there. And it's just like it's not working like that, you know.
Yep.
It's like that the interactions with plants are always like they always come with megafauna. They always come with different types of animals, insects, whatever that do disturbance. And
Correct.
without that, yeah, I mean, it's not understanding nature to just be like, oh, set it and leave it. Because
No.
us as humans as well, like primates, they're the
Yep.
prime, like they're the best example of the animals that do like really well disturbance. Like for example, gorillas, they construct a new nest every single day in the forest, you know, and
Yep.
uh, and yeah, they just like prune with their hands.
Yeah, and that's what I tell folks because we interrupted the natural ecosystem, so we lost a lot of these animals that would interact, and also we keep them out of these systems as well. You don't have deers thinning out the saplings of the trees to make room for the other ones to go
Hmm.
through. You know, hogs coming through and having that disturbance and whatnot. It goes on and on. So there's so going to syntropy of having that one big principle of management. That's I think the big thing that was like, yeah, that is so true. We have to follow through. We need to.
Hmm.
We're animals in these systems, and we need to interact with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also that part as well with like natural disturbances. So, for example,
Mm.
fire.
Yep.
Like people hate fire, but in truth, there are two types of fires. There's the hot fires and the cool fires. So,
Yep.
I was actually watching a video that Scott Hall put on YouTube, and it was him like observing a forest fire in Australia. I've never seen a forest fire, but that was the example of a cool fire, and it's the one that doesn't go up in the canopy and all that, you know. And
Yep. It
this
just
is
stays on the.
how eucalyptus and acacia forest get managed actually. And a lot of people are like, "Ah, we should be against that." But when you're against that, you create hot fires in the end, and it makes it far
Yep.
worse in a way.
Yeah, there's oh man, there's a term for ecological landscapes that require or benefit from fires because
Yeah,
Florida, it's oh,
pyro
I just
something,
learned
I
it.
guess.
Yes, yeah, pyro something. And because Florida is also like that too. We actually beneficial. We do a lot of prescribed burns here in Florida because it actually benefits our ecosystem. It's part of the flora of that how
Hmm.
this ecosystem function is like lightning strikes, forest fire goes through. Even a lot of the pines need that combustion, the fire and the forest canopy to go through. So yeah, it's funny how some people look at these things as big natural disasters, but it can if it's not kept up with, then it's poorly managed systems. I guess in California, it's like one example of poorly managed forestry that's happening there.
Yeah,
That they
I
they
mean,
don't allow fires to happen,
yeah, I
and
mean,
now it's
there's
so much
different.
accumulation. There's so much
There's
accumulation of
a
there,
fuel
and
load.
now
Yeah,
now the
I
fuel
mean,
load's so much higher, and then it goes into the hot fire versus what if it was kept up, it was a cold
hmm
fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is really that part there. Like, first off, like the monocultures of like pine and eucalyptus. First off, in
Yep.
nature, it doesn't work like that. Like, you can see
No.
even in eucalyptus forests in Australia, there's still grass growing through, and
Yep.
this idea that they create herbicide, they create that, this, and that. Usually, a lot of the time, it's overgrazing, or it's like poor management, or it's cutting down, or it's Roundup. It can be so
Yep.
many different reasons, and yeah, also we have to take into account that pines and eucalyptus don't have really a an animal that disturbs them in a certain way. That it's not the
Yeah, that's
same. I mean,
true.
as eucalyptus, I guess koalas do a job, but like it's nothing that's going to take down a massive trunk, I suppose.
No.
And
Nope.
yeah, I mean, there's a bit of that from koalas for sure. And then pines, I guess, there's these how do you call them? The processionary caterpillar that eat the tops sometimes of
Yep.
the new growth. But in truth, there's no such thing that creates a massive disturbance. So you kind of need to bring that the biomass to the ground. You kind of need fire, or you need wind, or you need hurricanes like you get
Yep.
yourself in
Yep.
Florida. And people hate these things, but that's just how it is. That's how
Keeps the
things
checks and
ought to be.
balance. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
keeps the system healthy. So
Yeah, yeah, actually, well, it makes me think I was gonna ask you some more logistical questions at first, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that makes me really think that we should talk a little bit more like about hurricanes because you have a lot of these here in
Yep.
Florida, and I would really like to know how for you having your syntropic tree lines really benefits from yeah, benefits and buffers against such
Sure.
events, which I guess there's no such thing as everything's going to be protected, but I guess you
Yep.
have much less loss that must happen. Can you explain? Can you expand a
Yes.
bit more about that?
Yes. So going back into why I also love Syntropy is just the high density within the lines, but the different succession of crops that go within it. So the reason behind also adopting it, syntropic agroforestry, was also hurricanes being a factor, and we also deal with extreme colds. So extreme heats, extreme colds, and extreme weathers. And now we're in a drought as well. So Florida, we're experiencing to every extreme. So the peak hurricane season for us, where it's super active, is September and October. And typically that's the time that we start planting our fall veggies. And every time I planted fall veggies before doing these tree lines, um, they would get hammered. And I was like, and then there was incidents that I'm like, man, CSA starts in 2 weeks and my field's flooded. So, but now there's certain crops that I grow that can take some of the wind. Papayas really can't. They can kind of take a little bit, but some of the dwarf type bananas that we grow. So I was like, okay, cool. Now I have different fruits that even if a hurricane comes through and they fall in, well, you can still eat green bananas. You can have some green papayas and whatnot. So it gave me that diversity of still having food and something to bring to market and to fulfill CSA. But a lot of times with the uh, a strong hurricane is going to wipe through anything, so it doesn't matter. But if we have those small storms or these outer bands, having these little windbreaks and interplanting and alley cropping annual vegetables with these perennial tree lines help give that buffer and that little break, and also from the extreme heat at that point. But at times I am pruning by September. I do prune heavy since I've noticed the pattern and going back into just recognizing like our natural ecosystem patterns of certain hurricanes. Like hurricanes are coming through to prune
Hmm.
and reset and bring down systems and to have that ecological disturbance. So I try to come through and be that hurricane and select the branches that I want through. So typically we do start opening up the system by our equinox. So around September 21st, 22nd. Um, we do a heavy pruning and open up the canopies a bit so we can actually allow airflow to go through. So there's like this balance of learning, or I'm still even learning the timing of when to prune in my area. Um, because if you prune too late, you don't take advantage of the tail end of the rain season and the heat to have that little bit of a regrowth, that good regrowth to have for frost protection during the winter months. But if you do it too early, then you have such a great regrowth happening, but then a hurricane comes through and some of that could just get impacted. So I'm still learning the timing of when the best to prune in my context. But going back into the hurricanes and having a diverse of different fruiting crops within the tree lines and the annuals, it just also helps with the diversity with like being able to bring stuff into market. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, that's all I have to really touch base on that. And yeah, you have a little bit of wind buffer, but at the same time, like when you're hitting 100 mile per hour winds, um, there's a lot of things getting brought down. But that's what over time I've been noticing too, incorporating more palms. We're not an area where we can grow coconut because we're too cold, but I've been observing more than really embracing a lot of Florida's landscape and just going more of the wild areas and some of these botanical gardens and whatnot and just seeing patterns. And palm trees are very common throughout the whole entire landscape of Florida. And those are the things that usually takes those winds. So as time goes on, I've actually been wanting to incorporate more palm trees as a support for our systems to maybe help buffer and create more of a little bit of wall for the more tender vegetables that we start planting in between that we alley crop in between these tree lines.
Hmm.
Yep.
Well, I see as well that yeah, I mean behind you you got loads of bananas, and I mean bananas if they get knocked down, I mean they regrow from the corm anyway. So
Yeah,
I
but I
guess
do focus a
it's
lot of dwarf varieties, so they
okay.
do take a win pretty good because they end up
I
getting like pretty stocky base. The leaves
okay.
get hammered, but a lot of times the you can have um some of the I've had banana survives almost category 3 hurricanes.
Well.
But it's usually the shorter, stockier ones, the dwarf types, and that's what I primarily focus because they
Hmm.
also tend to be cold hardy because we do get pretty cold and we do get a lot of wind. So and that's what I've noticed. I don't grow tall bananas here where I'm at in Central Florida, only in dwarf
Okay.
varieties. So nothing past typically things that grow about 8 feet, no more than 8 feet tall. So what is that about 2.5 meters at most?
Something like
I'd say.
that, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I see.
yeah.
Well, actually, well, talking a little bit about like buffers in that way, I was
Yeah.
also wondering what the impact is in terms of like has it improved your, let's say, profitability on the farm, less, let's say, labor, for example, requiring less compost or things
Hmm.
like that. Is there anything that you could say that yeah, having these tree lines and support species in place, like I mean, how it buffers your profitability and your farm,
Yeah.
your sustainability, and in the sense as well, obviously you have extra fruits compared to only having veggies. So if you can just
Yeah.
expand a bit on that.
Yeah. It depends on which system you're talking on the farm. So I have
Hmm.
pretty much three bigger systems that I've developed throughout the farm that kind of service their own function. If we're just talking about the market garden, when we alley crop veggies, we're still bringing in compost. I make compost on site. I
Hmm.
still bring in wood chips. I bring since I'm in the city in the context, those materials are easy for me to get through. So I'll get arborist wood chips as a carbon material, and then all my nitrogen materials produced here on the farm. So I use rabbit manure. We harvest poultry on the farm. We operate under the PL exemption 9432s, which is here in the United States. It gives the states the right to regulate it. So I'm regulated at a state level that we're allowed to process up to 20,000 birds on site and sell directly to consumers. You can't retail it elsewhere, but you can sell directly to consumers and restaurants with this. So we do process poultry on site where we harvest the blood, guts, feathers, which then gets into the compost, which then gets turned. Well, we do hot composting. So I always monitor around 140 degrees Fahrenheit and try and flip it every 3 to 6 weeks, but for the most part, maintaining that temperature. But alley cropping, and when it comes into the management of veggies, I don't really practice a lot of true syntropy within the alley of it. I'm still using minimal tillage. So after a crop's grown, I'll flail mow it, and then I'll use I've run a BCS with the tiller and with called the PDR, which you have a control of going like 1 inch deep, or you can go 12 inches deep. I have the flail mower and rotary plow, and I do that because there's a couple of tools that I use on my farm that just makes the efficiency of planting like direct seeding crops. I use a direct seeder, and then using a paper pot transplanter, which is a tool that you plant plants into these paper chains, and then this tool stretches out the paper chains throughout the whole bed. Um, and how I also look at it is when you're market gardening, you're always keeping your garden in placenta. You're refraining it from moving forwards in succession. So you're always keeping it in placenta and holding it back. So with that being said, most placenta species are usually coming through with ecological disturbance happening. So my mechanized ecological disturbance is like an equivalent of a landslide. So I'm always having that mini landslide happening in the market garden, which I'll address it and bring in compost after and do that. The tree lines helps a lot with having that ecological buffer. So during the hotter season, there's more shade, it's keeping it cool. And then on the warmer, so yeah, warmer season, cool, cooler season, keeping keeping it warmer. So there's a lot less frost that touches through. And also to have that habitat for insects, because I'm also zero spray on the farm. It's been 3 years now, and this is the beautiful thing, diving deep into Syntropy and understanding the function of pests and disease and what their service is to the ecosystem, and what they're showing us that it's pest and disease is a stress response. So either too much or too much of something, or too little of something, or maybe the environment's not right for that one crop to do, because it's there for the optimization of life. So it's either gonna remove it out of succession, or remove it out of the system so the next best thing can move forward into succession, or that plant's gonna overcome that and come out on the other side even stronger. So it's there for the optimization of life. However, at least that's how I perceive that that at least principle, or the philosophy within. And so understanding that I want to make sure I'm cultivating the space for all insects. There's no discrimination. Who's if to tell me if this insect's bad or good? And then also, if you spray even the organic stuff, it doesn't pick and choose which insects you're going, and then you're constantly throwing off the balance of the ecosystem. So in the beginning, it is a little rough to watch some of your plants chew on, but I've noticed over the years, the more healthier my soil gets, the more I cultivate the environment. And also timing is essential of when certain crops are doing better than others. Um, that's where I've learned to like just let it work its way out. Works its balance, work the balance within the system. Um, so that's what, and it also helps with water, because I do irrigate the farm. I'm in the business. This is my livelihood. I don't have any other external income or whatnot. So I just like having that reinsurance of like I need irrigation, especially we're growing veggies during our dry season. And Florida is pretty abundant with water, even though we're in the drought. You dig about a meter, 2 meters into the ground and you hit water. Our water table is high. I run two shallow wells that are 45 feet deep. And yeah, so with having these tree lines and this ecological buffer, less evaporation, less wind drift. Also, you're irrigating, the tree lines are getting irrigated. They're capturing, holding that water into the landscape. You don't have this extreme wind coming through, misting, taking it off. And and like I said, less evaporation, because the more trees we had and the more the canopy, a lot of that water is staying within. Um, so that's the perk and how I use those tree lines to my advantage, at least for the market garden.
And I
For the
assume
back, yeah,
I
go for it.
assume that well, just before we go into the poultry,
Yeah.
I assume that your soil here also in Florida is mostly sandy, so also like it doesn't
Yeah,
retain the moisture as much. So irrigation is like if it was clay, maybe it wouldn't be required.
correct. Yeah, and that's where it's increasing organic matter. I also do a tremendous amount of cover cropping during the warm season. So that's why we'll hit it. Our cool season, so our growing season for annual vegetable is from October to June. So we spend all of the summer of pretty much June, July, and August, and early parts of September just cover cropping. So we'll do a lot of cover cropping then. And with the compost helps. And I also do make biochar here on the farm. I just
Mm.
started implementing that. Um, Primarily using bamboo to make the biochar. I learned from another practitioner here, or a practitioner that's really big into biochar and using bamboo. So the bamboo, the biochar were also used in the chicken brooder to inoculate. So that also helps with the smell and absorbing the excess nitrogen from the manure, and also from the rabbits that we keep here. When we have collection bins where the manure is at, where we fill in biochar, and also we to be able to capture all their urine as well. So we inoculate our biochar through those two processes of the rabbits and the chicken brooders, which then goes into the compost, gets aged in the compost, and then the compost gets spread out. So our compost also will have a little bit of biochar spread throughout, and that's how we're also building that healthy soil as well.
Mm.
Um, so I'm adapting and many different farming techniques and practices. I'm not one to be very dogmatic. Context really dictates our decision. Wherever you're located will determine. It's nice to have all these different uh, tools, resources, techniques out there in your back pockets. It's just learning to um, when it's applicable to that context to be able to use it. So there's a time and place
Mm.
for everything. And then sometimes you really have these certain ideologies and you really want to try to do it, but maybe it's not very real and practical now. And sometimes it's good to kind of put that ideology in your back pocket for a year or two to be able to build it up to that point and do that. Because when you're first starting up a farm, there's a lot of things against you and it's hard. So, and you just have to do what makes sense financially at first. Um, and yeah, so trailed off a little bit of that question too.
Totally fine. Totally fine.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, actually, I remember we were like when we were on a phone call like a couple of weeks ago, you
yep,
were telling me a lot that yeah, the farming that you do is really not about dogma because in a
yep,
way, if you do tropic farming and you have a purist approach to it, it's like, oh yeah, you got to produce all the feed on the property for the poultry and all that. That's asking too much, you know. I
that
find
is
that
asking a lot.
I've seen like some people saying this like I'm going to do a system for chickens like that, and I'm like, well, do you realize the amount of grain, the amount of feed that you need to produce for them, and then you need to have that all year round? I mean, yeah, maybe it's great if you have a big field and then you can get yeah, I mean you could do a sort of like operation like that. I don't know, like with tree lines every 20 meters and have grain growing between
Yep.
and then have silos to like do that, but that takes so much
Well, that's a lot of
infrastructure.
questions.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a niche
Oh
that needs
man.
to be filled by someone, not by yourself. I think it's too
Yep.
much to want to be sufficient on everything. No one has that kind of money and yeah.
It's
So
in time and sanity, but you could eventually grow that. Like,
yeah.
and that's even growing a system complex enough that maybe you don't even need grain, but you got to figure out how much you would have to produce and how many birds you
Yeah.
can feed. So at least going into our poultry system, it's like we're still supplementing grain, but like at
Mhm.
least we're using 20% less grain, and which is great because then or
That's
20,
good.
30% of their it's coming from forage.
Hmm.
So, and versus 100% grain. So that's where, but over time, it'll be nice to learn to be able to grain farm, or maybe not even use a lot of grain. And I also tell folks it's context dictated. If I was a homesteader in the space I have, all I need is about maybe 15 birds, 20 birds for myself. Then I have plenty of room, and the complexity of this system could pretty much sustain their egg productivity for at least myself. But if I'm in the
Hmm.
business making eggs, these birds we raise hybrid breeds, laying eggs, so they're very productive on uh, pushing out a tremendous amount of eggs, but they also need a lot of that energy and resource. So how you're going to
Hmm.
make up that energy and resources? At the end of the day, when
Yeah.
it comes into farming in general, and learn this through Syntropy, we're just managing energy and
Hmm.
shifting and moving energy around. And you got to learn like if energy is leaving the farm or you this takes up this many energy, how you're making that up elsewhere or capturing them, making that
Yeah.
complexity of energy and moving into that.
Yeah, because it's not just the energy of the plants, it's the
Mhm.
energy of ourselves too. Because I mean, there's
Mhm.
this certain task that I mean, it's for me, I really learned with the 80-20 rule. So basically,
Yes. Yep. That's a beautiful rule.
20% of the effort should get 80% of the results.
Yep.
And that I find like there's no point in being too precise about things. Same thing, for example, there's this big thing with, for example, using a wood chipper, like
Hmm.
on the lines. It takes forever if you don't have
Yep.
unless you have really straight trunks that you can get and fill them in like that. I do not see the point of using it because it's
Hmm.
just like a ridiculous amount of petrol use for stuff. Now we just go with flail more. That works
Yep.
much better. Just we
Yep.
can make 2 kilometers of lines in 2 hours, like the guy with the tractor does it for us. So
Yep.
makes much more sense. And yeah, the labor is also in a way we gotta consider the energy of ourselves too, not just the plants, because that's actually a reductionist approach to just be like, that's just the plants and we want to create abundance, but at what
Yep.
cost? At what cost? That's always a question.
Ex exactly. That's where context dictates that. And that's where I
Mhm.
feel like people really need to sit down and not be so dogmatic about certain practices and like, what's your
Yeah,
goal? Financial
and it's
goal, living
different.
goal, what's your
It's
lifestyle? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
totally different as well when you're doing homestead. Like for example,
Hmm.
I'm sure chickens, yeah, as you say, maybe you could feed them with just your own things that you grow, or your own
Hmm.
plants, if it's homestead. But then when you're doing bigger production, I mean, I think it's more about also depending on each other. So it'd be great if there'd be such people that would do systems like that that are also like, how would I say, syntropically buffered as well, that
Yep.
would make grain and all that in some
I
way.
like how you said that,
Yeah,
subtropically
I don't know.
buffered. That's good.
But you know what I mean? Like these kind of
Yeah.
like I've heard of a few people like experimenting with that, with thinking of like for cattle or for grains to just be like, let's say a tree line every 30 meters or something like that, and
Hmm.
then have, grow your
And
grains.
alley. Yep.
Yeah, alley
You alley
cropping.
crop your grains. Yep. You're alley
Yeah,
crop.
that just
Um,
adds that's a pretty good thing, and you can see I see the massive difference with just tree lines. It's not
yep.
just because I like that; it's just because I see that the grass is growing so much more when you have a tree line. It's
Yes.
incredible. It takes a year or two, and you already see the difference.
Exactly. And that's what I encourage a lot too. It's like, all right, cool. We'll have these nice perennial tree lines, but let's start alley cropping other things. And you can do that conventionally in the sense of the mechanized farming that we do.
Of course.
And you're still going to see a huge difference of incorporating trees into the landscapes. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day too, and why going back into thinking back to one of the questions you asked with Syntropy, what also led me to it, I also fully comprehend that perennial systems are the most sustainable systems in the sense there's less soil disturbance and they're more productive. You plant them, you're managing them versus annual production systems are very labor intensive.
Hmm.
I'd rather be managing trees and plants. So,
Yeah.
and so understanding that, but then that's where it comes into balance and
Hmm.
learning. Because then in Syntropy too, you have the opposite of Syntropy, which I don't never hear enough of, is entropy. um, and they're always, and that's with life in general, is you always have these dualities, these opposite forces, the yin and the yang, life and death, syntropy, entropy, light, dark, loud, silence, whatever, ones and zeros. And masculine and feminine. Oh, and that's another thing too. What really attracts me to agroforestry as well is I feel like it is the balance of feminine and masculine in agriculture because agriculture itself is very masculine energy. It's very dominant. It's led by the mind. It's logical. Um, Versus nature is feminine. It leads from the heart. It's nurturing. So to have this combination of that masculine, feminine energy, when it comes into agriculture, that's why I feel like agroforestry is that byproduct of the balance of the two
Hmm.
forces and the two different and energies.
Yeah.
And so I lost my train of thought of where we
Totally
were
fine.
before.
That's a
Yeah,
fascinating topic
yeah,
too. But yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I
So,
agree with you. Like in a way, also, I kind of like there's these things like I post quite recently on Instagram. Like these days, I post quite a lot, quite consistently, and I speak a lot about like for example, utilizing eucalyptus, utilizing acacia, whatever. And people keep on telling me you shouldn't plant that. Your trees will die. This plant will create herbicide. This plant will do this and that. And I'm like,
mhm.
okay, that's what science says, but I mean, trust my observation here. Like, I don't need to
Yeah.
know the science
Mhm.
behind that to tell you that it works. It's like this thing of like, as you say, of using the mind.
Mhm.
It's so well and good, yeah, that this really, it's really important to use the mind correctly in this, like to just systemize everything. That's super important. But at the same
Yes.
time, there's certain things you cannot, there's a mystery to life that you
Mm.
just can't really
Yep.
try to comprehend. You could try to do that. You could try to delve in the science of it and all, but only have so much time. Like, how can you do this? Some people are meant to do this kind of thing
Yep.
and go search this, but for me, I'm not. I need to be practical. And then when you're doing a
Hmm.
farming operation like yourself, you need to be practical too. And it's a lot about, yeah, in the heart as well. The heart leads the decisions as well. And
Yep.
it's the heart and the mind need to go
Hmm.
together. And as you say, for example, permaculture could be a little
Yep.
bit too much on the, I'm not saying all
Then
permaculture farms, but
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
can be a little
Not
bit
all,
like
not to,
airy.
not to,
It can be a
not to
bit,
talk down on it. There's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah, no,
beauties behind
no,
it,
no.
but
There is for
yeah,
sure. But like the
yeah.
permaculture plantings can be a little bit
Yep.
like hairy fairy kind of thing. So I
Yes.
plant a tree there, another tree there. But lines, you deal with
Yep.
lines. That's also you taking the good out of conventional agriculture too, because there's good in
Hmm.
that too.
Yes.
You're taking. That's the thing that's fascinating is that you actually combining these things. So you're using the spacing of
Hmm.
monoculture. You're using the line system or the linear system of monoculture, and you're also trying to incorporate machinery in a way that is good for labor. Whereas I
Hmm.
find that the other projects that do not use this approach sometimes they're like, I'm not going to use a tractor; it's going to compact the soil. I'm like, what's going on? You need
Mm.
to like farm. Like you can't do
Compaction.
everything by
Oh
hand.
man, when people go on the compaction comes from consistent going over and
Yeah, exactly.
one
And tilling
overpass
and
and
tilling
walking and
and
tilling.
cutting grass is not the same.
Yes,
So
exactly.
so it's really interesting how the balance is really created with this. And yeah, I mean that's really a fascinating thing because that's the thing. Like we cannot just like demonize conventional agroforestry like agroforestry or agriculture all the time because we need to take things from there. Like there's really
Yep,
important things. And yeah, I mean we need to work more with nature, obviously that's more important. But at the end of
yep,
the day, if you have an operation to produce something,
yep,
well, you can't just yeah. I mean, it's just what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to do
yep.
compromises, as yourself you say.
Correct.
You were tilling your beds. I don't even know. Like, do you actually mulch your beds or not?
No, so I plant at a high density that eventually I form a canopy. So it's typically I do a shallow till, like one to
Hmm.
2 inches. So you're talking about only a depth of that. So I'm not hitting the subsoil, just the
Hmm.
surface level. So typically foil mow, work at it, and because then I'll run the gritter and I plant at a high density that typically I'll do one or two little wire weeding or cultivation. And then at that point it forms a high density that the soil's covered anyways from the the canopy of the plants and the density that I
Hmm.
planted at.
Hmm.
The mulching I'll do here and there. This season I'll mess with some crimping, doing cover crop crimping and transplanting in it. But that's only when you're hand transplanting certain crops. It wouldn't work with the tools, the other two tools that I use of the paper pot transplanter and
Hmm.
the direct seeder. Um, it would be a little challenging, especially yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so and I have tried mulching before, and this is another thing because I'm like, oh, how would it be without having to use any annual cover crops? How much clumping grass would I need to plant to be able to mulch a whole block that's 14 feet by 50 feet? And what was it? It took me 153 6. I think it was 1,200 linear feet of Napier grass to be able to get a decent mulching into that block, and I probably could have used a little bit more. So I'm like, man, and it was the amount of energy that it took on my end to be able to run down these lines because I ideally it's best to do it in situ and just chop and drop and fall it there without having to haul it from the other part of the field. But I give that a try. So my goal is and my method is always planned at a high density to form that to keep that to form that canopy and
Yeah.
keep the ground cover. So
Yeah, I mean that's actually another example of like
mhm.
this dogma you need everything mulched. Well, in truth,
Yeah,
like you can have a living mulch, like you can have ground
yes,
cover, you can have things like that, and that acts as a mulch, and then so it's protected. So at
yep,
the end of the day,
ex-
yeah, there's
yep.
ways to go around that, and
Mhm.
well, but that's a pretty good balance that you're finding here. Because I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, it would be better if it was mulch, and on top of
mulch.
that, this
I
living mulch.
agree.
But
Yes.
like better, but in terms of work, like what do you do? It's too
You
much labor.
compromise. There's a little
Yeah,
compromise,
it's
and that just
compromise.
depends because over the years, it could be me moving away from these certain crops as well. like maybe I'm not planting a high amount of lettuce and different root vegetables and growing baby greens. Maybe over times I'm just doing more like kales, collards, broccolis, and that things I could transplant. And at that point I could get more into mulching and then also do a little bit more successional, like a little more placenta successional planting in the sense of like, all right, so we have a placenta crop that's out in 30 days and then the next one that's going to be harvest in 60 days, and I can take advantage of
Hmm.
one planting and plan out all my succession for veggies in that one planting in that mulch bed. But in this context and where I'm at, and also the amount of people and labor, I also have to keep it simple as well, because I to teach these complex and to be able to teach people how to transplant. It's like, oh, here you plant this every 12 inches. And then in between, it gets a little too complicated to relay a lot of this information to some folks. And especially
Yeah.
my labor is mostly volunteer apprentices and interns. And so I also have to make it simple to be able to relay this information to the help that I have. If I'm
Hmm.
always around practitioners that think the same way and understands, then I can get a little bit more complex because it's easier to direct. They understand what to go about. But when you're having a lot of new people coming into this and coming in and working in this farm and learning, it's good to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And that's where you choose your battle and context dictates that. So
Yeah, I see. I
um
mean, as well, like this is the same thing. It's like this idea that, oh, if you're doing syntropic ag, it means that with annuals you need to stratify your veggies, and it's like, well,
mhm,
no, the tree lines are actually the what you need is really the root exudates from the tree lines and well the shade that they create and all the other benefits. But you don't need
mhm,
to stratify everything, and if you do that,
mhm.
sometimes it ends up in a mess because you're just like, oh, let's say something in the middle that's emergent, like let's say okra or whatever, and
Yep.
then on the sides you put I don't know, like I kind of did that with like physalis, for example, and it was just a
Hmm.
mess, you know. It's a mess
Yep.
because then you have to take out the okra from below when it's dead, and then you already have this physalis that's like massive. It's like
Yeah.
what's it kind of makes a big mess, and it's really difficult to keep track already that you have
It's
these kind of
timing.
calculations
Yep.
of
It's
timing
timing.
that are
Yeah.
so
Yep.
important. It's like sometimes just gonna plant simple, and
Yep. Because sometimes
that's
you
it.
got to get the timing, like you'll transplant this crop, but direct seed this crop, or you
Yeah.
transplant this one, or you start seeding this one a week later, or come back 2 weeks later and plant that. So it gets a little, it's possible because how I home garden in my raised beds, I always kind of mimic centipede within it and annuals vegetables. Like that's no till, it's always
Mm,
mulch, but that's
mm.
my little home garden bed that I mess with and that I'm doing stratification and successional planting, at least with my annual crops of like
Yeah, it's
some
fun.
placenta one placenta. It's fun and that.
Fun
But
to
when
see.
you're doing acres of it, it's
Yeah.
like, all right, let's simplify this because this is going to get way complicated and way messy, and it's
Mhm.
not going to be productive or profitable as well.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think also the thing that is not really understood and is that also the context in which we're in makes that first off, labor is really expensive and there's not that many people that farm. So if we had more
yeah,
people farming, there'd be much more people, like let's say, helping you out on your farm, for example.
yep,
And that's what's going on. Like for example, in Brazil, it's much cheaper to like hire someone in agriculture.
yep,
But yeah, but nowadays it's all you got to be reliant on machinery and dependent
yep,
on that, and then people like away, you know.
yep. Yeah,
So
because Brazil has
in a
Brazil has an
certain way,
agrarian
it will
community.
be
Yeah,
possible to do
yeah,
this kind of planting if you had more people, you know,
yep,
in a way.
yep.
Yes, it's more productive. Yes, you get more food from that. That's for sure. But at the end of the day, it's like we live in a context right now that just
Hmm.
doesn't allow us to do that. And
Correct.
it's the economical context matters also as much. So
And
it's
that's
like, yeah,
where I'm also trying to move because you mentioned the people
yeah,
aspect, and that's where agroforestry too, I think is a beautiful thing because it is a community thing, and like and it should be because
hmm
we have a whole community of different plants and different succession within our systems. And I think the external part of us humans of having that community aspect of working on these systems together is a beautiful thing. And that's where I feel like the larger like when you're scaling up Syntropy, if you're depending on context and where you are in the part of the world, like being here in the United States, labor is low and you want to mechanize it. But if you're in an area where there's a huge agrarian community, there's a lot of people that are into it, then it's a beautiful thing that you can make it more complex
hmm
and take part of it. Um, I
yeah,
do try, and that's another thing too. I do try and keep my systems a little bit more over time, so I keep refining what plants I'm using and simplifying it in the sense of community engagement as well. Because when if I have volunteers, and there's a lot of people that are very fascinated and want to do and engage this, but there you also got to meet them at their level. It's like, all right, let me simplify this. I'm able to explain this so they can digest it, and also let me focus on some key species here, and then like it makes it easier. So when I have bigger groups of helping me out to do some management, it's like, okay, you're this person, you're managing this plant, and within this line, that's all you're focusing on. And then you see the pattern every 3 feet, you'll have this plant. And then they start recognizing, and then they start developing. Okay, I'm seeing the pattern of this plant. Because I could look down the lines and I could identify every single plant and tree there. But that we're years in practitioners, we understand plants that yeah, you can see this, but when people are like, I'm telling people like, hey, be mindful when you're cutting, because when you open this up, there's something behind that and planting, be mindful. And some people are like, oh, I would never seen that. It's like, so teaching people how to identify those leaf textures and sizes and whatnot. So,
Yeah, it
but
takes some patience, I guess.
it
But
takes a lot of patience. And then that's why I also, oh man, also going back to Syntropy, what I love it is just that abundance mindset of planting more than what you need. And because nature plants in abundance, and also carrying it over. When I go like going back to that talk, that's why I love Syntropy too, because like I said, it's more than just planting a forest. It's I feel like there's a lot of you can relate on it on a personal spiritual level as well.
mhm.
It relates to
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, but
that.
that's so good. But
Yeah,
yeah, I was just thinking, like, by the way, yeah, we were
yeah,
just saying, like, okay,
yeah,
this is the context we're in, economically speaking. We're in this
yeah,
context, and actually, that's where it would really be helpful for you to explain a bit more about how you deal and you run with your diverse enterprises, the CSA and all that,
yeah,
because that is definitely a way that is like going out of this economical context of globalization and all that, going
yeah,
to like more local food production and
yep,
more food sovereignty as well. And the fact
correct.
that it's diverse, that it's not just like one avenue and that's it.
Yep.
Um, that's really something that'd be helpful if you can like sum it up if you can kind of explain how it works.
Yeah. And this is where I think it's great. Even well, I don't recommend farms to automatically jump into CSA because there's a lot of stress behind CSA because you have people put money up front into the season and in return they're expecting this. But they also understand that they're at the same risk level as you are as a farmer. But it also gives me the opportunity to be able to keep pushing the boundaries. And I feel like I'm pretty transparent of what's happening here at the farm. There's still some things that we push. I have those things in my back pocket that are always going to be like, okay, I know I'm going to produce this and get this result. And then there's times I'm like, okay, I got to keep pushing and diversifying and seeing how far can I push the limits on this. That still makes it economically viable and still keeping good productivity. It goes back to the one of the things I said earlier, the diversity builds resilience. So it's not having a diverse sales outlet, a diverse crops, and not only having also a diverse enterprise, and especially animals, I feel like complements farms very well because they also contribute to the systems with the fertility of their manure and also their function of their pest management as well. They help eat and burrow some pests burrow into the soil. They're always scratching and looking for those bugs and grubs as well. So they have an ecological benefit to the system. And and just thinking of certain times of year, like for instance, we went through a historic freeze this past winter earlier this year. And if I was just a papaya and banana farmer, I just lost my whole entire crop. But I'm growing veggies and I had a lot of brassicas in the field and lettuce and some cool season herbs, and they can take temperatures super low. We're talking about temperatures down 21 Fahrenheit, which is -6 Celsius, which is
Whoa,
not
that's
normal.
super cold. That's much colder
Yeah,
than by us. It's even colder than
yeah.
by us. Wow, it's crazy.
And then we had almost 3 days in temperatures in the 20s. And but that's something that happens every 10 to 15 years. And then I started looking back at our weather pattern. I'm like, okay, yeah, it is normal for us to get cold. It's like that. So it's something to be mindful about. Like, even though majority of the time we are hitting these where we pretty much have mild winters where we can push a lot of subtropical and some tropical fruits almost year round. You can't fully rely on that. Even with citrus, Florida was a big, used to be a huge citrus producing state. And even back in the late 1800s and certain parts to the 1900s, there was always big historical freeze that knocked them out. Um, so anyways, going back to the diversity, if I just grew citrus, then I would have been done. And especially now with the greening that we've been dealing with and not being able to fix it. Now it's more challenging to grow citrus here in Florida than ever. But that's also because we exploited citrus and monocropped it and pumped it with chemicals and the stress response of nature fighting back of eventually that psyllid making it over here and knocking it out. But that's a whole nother conversation. But
Mhm.
the having diverse enterprises and that so that helps. So it also goes back to the diverse sales outlet because when I first started this farm, my background's originally in the culinary arts, and I was primarily selling directly to chefs until 2020 happened and all the world shut down. All the restaurants I was working with closed down. And I was like, oh, there goes my sales outlet. So that's another flaw that I experienced. I'm like, I put all my eggs in one basket of securing and selling produce just to restaurants, and I was growing a lot of niche vegetables and baby vegetables in every color size that was out there. Um, so that was a lesson learned. Like I need to have just diverse sales outlet. Going through multiple storms, either extreme colds and freeze. That's where I'm like, well, I need to be growing diverse vegetables. And then also, I lost my compost stores there, and that's why I adopted poultry because I'm like, well, poultry brings in a tremendous amount of manure, and if I process them, because even if you look at bags of organic fertilizer, it's blood meal, feather meal, bone meal, whatever. It's byproducts of the animal industry, but mostly coming from CAFO systems, concentrated animal feeding operations. And I'm like, man, here at that point, I was like, well, I'm trying to be sustainable and I'm trying to develop this amazing ecosystem. Is it really sustainable bringing external resources that come from sources that are not sustainable? Not really. I still use them and they're on standby, but I use less of them as the years go by, and they're there as needed. My goal is not to use that. But so going back
Mhm.
to the diverse enterprises and having the diverse sales outlet helps a lot. And I think in the sense of the threes, and I like to do things in trios. I think three is a powerful number. Triangles are the most powerful shapes there are. And I guess you can dive deeper into the number threes and the patterns through other
Mhm.
theologies out there. But uh CSA, restaurants, farm stand. Cool. Most of my bread and butter, though, is my CSA. I would say about, and it goes into the 80-20 rule. 80% of my revenue, I feel like, is CSA. The other 20% comes from restaurants and um,
Farm
our
stand.
farm stand. Yeah, farm stand. And then for the enterprises, I'm also adding another enterprise to the farm because before it was fruits and veggies. I categorize those as ones because they're both systems. Because sometimes I grow my veggies within my tree lines, uh, even
Mhm.
though they're technically fruits. So I'll grow a lot of my pumpkins and squash within the tree lines. They're fruiting crops, but we classify them as veggies, but whatever. Fruits and veggies, I put in one enterprise, poultry, and now nursery because I have a lot of folks in this area that want to grow their own food, but they want a more consistent source of like veggie starts and some trees. And there's more people getting into agroforestry and food forestry that they're looking for these sources. So now I
Mhm.
have the three enterprise of fruits and veggies, poultry, and nursery. So I'm not relying on. So if I have a bad hurricane, I'm like, hey, CSA members, I'm sorry, we're going to be a little bit slow, or we're going to not have an abundance right now, but I still need revenue. So okay, I still got my plant starts and poultry. Usually they handle the hurricanes pretty well, unless if you keep them in a low spot. But for the most part, all right, cool. I still got my chicken enterprises. So that helps a lot. Like what we mentioned earlier, what you said, like not having all your eggs in one basket. I'm trying to spread my eggs in all these baskets to make sure not one goes down because there's so much farming is hard already. So, and the more consistent and the more consistency of revenue you could bring or the diversity, it helps buffer that. And I'll take that back. I am have a fourth enterprise, which is agritourism.
Not the perfect number three then.
Yeah, no, not the perfect number three. It would now go into agritourism. I have because the nursery is it, so I messed up on that. But the agritourism is the big is now where I'm also
Mm.
putting a lot of energy to because we do a lot of farm dinners here, a lot of workshops, farm tours, and educational things. So that's one thing is just bringing awareness. And a lot of people love the on farm experience. So I'll take that back. I did try to do three, but there is a fourth. the nursery is the newest aspect of it, but man, but to be honest, the more diversified where it makes sense as well, because you also don't want to be so diversified then like you're stretched so thin, unless if you have each of them in a solid foundation or like they're able to sustain themselves. Um, context, remember,
Yeah, I
dictates all
mean,
that.
unless you have like one person to do each of them, which would
Yes,
make
yeah.
most.
And that's the goal too, and where I'm moving
Yeah.
now, because now I'm actually trying to simplify each operation that I could have people operate that. Okay, cool. I got someone to operate this aspect of the business, this aspect of the business, and then and work it as a whole. Um, and it also goes back to kind of like taking the principles and some of the principles and philosophy of Syntropy and applying it to a business aspect of it. And you have the layers of your business. That's the stratification, the management of these business, how you're stratifying all that. That's how I kind of relay and look at it. Um, even I like, yeah, because the more diverse there is, the more resilient. And if one falls down or moves out of succession, and sometimes too, and this is what I tell folks, you don't always like if you really want to farm but you rather your passion is certain fruits or certain animals, veggies is so profitable and such a quick, easy money. You could also have succession within your enterprise. So you can start off as a market gardener for the first 2, 3 years. And then as the force is developing and pushing forward into succession, and now you have certain fruiting crops come in. Now, hopefully, if that fruiting crops can make up the revenue that the veggies were doing, cool, that's the next business in there. So you can go from growing veggies and then slowly transition out of veggies into then growing fruits, just primarily just fruits or whatever you're passionate about, or livestock.
Mhm.
So that's another aspect too that I try to put people in that mindset. Like you could have these enterprises successional that they're only there for a period of time to get you to that next step as well. So
Mhm.
that's not one thing. So you can have a placenta enterprise, your secondary enterprise, and then your climax enterprise.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean,
uh
also, I mean,
and yeah.
that's that really makes me like a tangent here. Like, it makes me think as
Yeah.
well. Like, I hired a consultant about 3 years ago and made us a
Mhm.
super dense system. So like every 2 meters a tree line, you know.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
what ended up happening, yeah, and what ended up happening is like it's true. It built loads of topsoil. It did. It built like that much
Oh,
topsoil in some spots,
oh,
which is
nice. Okay.
which is good. But like it just made
Yeah.
me think as well that you could also reverse it, like in a sense, have all these support lines, and then cut them down, and then use the fertility for veggies. I don't know. I've
It's
never
never
heard
permanent.
anyone
And that's
say
what I
doing
love
it,
us.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But that's another thing too. Even if you don't know, and maybe you're like, hey, I want to farm, just plant at such a high density, you go crazy planting.
Hmm.
Worst case scenario, you prune it and reset it back. That soil is going to only be better anyways.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I love about Syntropy too, and pruning. It's nothing in nature is permanent. Nothing in life is ever permanent. It's like everything has a certain cycle. And at any point, you can terminate that and transition it to something else or have a slow transition.
Hmm.
One example too, I had a monocultured peaches. It was just a half acre planted peaches, 15 feet by 15 feet. What is that, like five? What is that, 4.5 meters, I
15
think?
feet, that's like 4.5 meters by 4.5, more or less.
Is it something around there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just managed it organically, organic spray, organic fertilizer. And I was like, peaches here in Florida is a pain to begin with. That's a whole nother topic. But I was like, well, this needs more life, more diversity. I wanted to implement a lot of the principles of Syntropy into it. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to remove the trees. I'll just go ahead and prune them a bit and then start planting all my supports and then plant another species within. Eventually, first I was going to transition out peaches into mangoes, but now I'm not even doing mangoes because now experiencing a historical freeze, I don't want to plant half an acre of mangoes. So focus now, move out of peaches into avocados, lychees, and lemons.
Hmm.
Um, is what the peach orchard's eventually going to transition, and also to be able to support running chicken tractors of chicken broilers for meat.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
um,
okay. That's
but
great.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. So the agroforestry, what I love, it's never permanent. You can plant it. You can do that high diversity, high planting. And at any point you're like, oh, you know what? My context has changed, or now I'm a little more focused, or I know what I need to do. Cool. And reset it and replant it, but that soil is going to be even better. And you're going to thank yourself 2, 3, 4 years down the line. And that's why I'm always trying to think of like, try and think ahead down the line, at least 4 or 10 years down the line, so I can help my future self. And
Mm.
you can help your future self like by planting a high density like you did, like you planted at such a high density that you developed so much topsoil. But now you're like, oh, you know what, I want to start market gardening, I want to start growing veggies. If you didn't plant that high density system, you would have never achieved that beautiful topsoil that now you could probably grow veggies in it pretty well,
Mhm.
better than what it was previously before that was planted.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely. There's a flexibility to it that is just incredible. And I find that, yeah, I
yes.
mean, as I say, it works as well with animals, holistic
Hmm.
management, or with poultry, or with veggies or perennials, like whatever it is, like in a sense as well. Like you find, like, I don't know, your crop gets hammered by a pest because
Hmm.
you didn't plant it in the right soil. There wasn't the right successional like ability of the soil. Then this dies,
Yep.
and then it's just like, okay, I already have my base, I already have my foundation, I already have a good soil, and even I
Yep.
already have the support species, so I can use the same thing, just chop them down to the base. Some will grow, some will not, and then replant. I
Hmm.
mean, what's the problem with that? And
No, no
yeah,
problem with
yeah,
that.
exactly. It's like it's quite incredible, like the level of flexibility that it has.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, that's why I'd really like to know a bit more about how you run your poultry operation. Like,
Mhm.
um, yeah, can you let us know a bit about that?
Yeah.
What's the number actually? How
So,
many chickens do you have?
so I run a small lane flock anywhere between, right now we have 25, but 50s at most. I don't have enough room for it. And also egg laying or producing eggs isn't super profitable. It's just kind of there as a little bit of support, and layers are more active. Broilers will raise anywhere between 75 to 150 birds a month. Um, right now we have about 150 birds out in the food forest, out in the agroforestry system right now. We're about 2 weeks from harvest, and this will be our last harvest for the season, and we'll start that back up in September. Um, so and that's where going and understanding poultry. So if I have a poultry enterprise, well, I need to look back at the origin of poultry, or where they're originally from. They're jungle fowl from Southeast Asia. They're low strata, low dwelling, omnivore birds that are there to clean up the forest floor. They're always looking for fallen fruits, nuts, seeds, bugs, grubs, whatever are their opportunists, and to be able to cultivate that same space and to mimic that environment that the origin of chicken comes from. Um, so that's why we have a bunch of like mulberries planted, peaches. That's why I like to incorporate the poultry into the fruit as well, because then after fruits harvest and post harvest, all the fallen fruits in there, they get super buggy, um, and whatnot. And then all the organic stuff, even though chickens can be a pain in the ass in an agroforestry system, because they do like to scratch underneath all the organized, the hard work that we do of organizing all that chop and drop material, all that they like to pull it back, because that's where all the decomposers of the insects, all the millipedes, roaches, and grubs that are helping also breaking that down. That's where they're dwelling. But yeah, poultry makes up a small revenue. It's a complement. It complements the fruits and veggies, in my opinion, in the sense, like I told you, I primarily wanted them to be able to harvest the byproduct of poultry with the blood, feather, all their innards, and then to also capitalize on their manure as they're moving down the system. So the broilers we run in chicken tractors, since we do run Cornish cross. Cornish cross is a hybrid breed. Standard the industry standard for chickens. So they're typically raised in hen houses, but we raise them in these broilers. I don't do the full netting full range, because we do deal with a lot of area predators, and Cornish cross aren't the fastest, strongest birds, so they get picked off easily. So I find it easier just to keep them in chicken tractors, and we move those daily in the with along the tree lines. The layers we keep in a mobile coop, and we run poultry netting. and that will move anywhere between 7 to 14 days, depending on what impact we want those chickens to have on the landscape. So we really try to use the layers to like, because if there's an area that I need a heavy disturbance or it got super weedy because I didn't plant enough in succession, or I had a gap in there or whatever, if I need them to have a big impact, I'll concentrate them there for a long period of time, have them do a bit the impact that I need, and then move them elsewhere.
Hmm.
So they're there because how I look at the whole entire farm, it's the whole ecosystem. It's a super organism, and the poultry is part of that, this organism of the farm that they shuffles and moves around the farms for fertility. So I just feel like it's just the poultry enterprise there is there to complement and help enhance the fertility of the farm, but it also helps enhance also the revenue of the farm as well, and also attracts people because it's nice. Oh, cool! I'll buy a whole chicken. I'll buy a bottle of honey and some kales, collards, and some bananas or whatever, or
Hmm.
papayas, and so it's nice to have a little bit more diversity to the stand and to the CSA too, because if I have 80 CSA members buying veggie shares, well, that's 80 customers that I can keep adding more product to. What else can I fulfill? I'm like, all right, cool. Some of them add chicken and eggs. So I have CSA members that they come here, they get a bag of produce of a mix of fruits and veggies, but they're also getting a whole chicken and they're also going home with a dozen eggs. And that's a pretty cool place. Like, cool, you get that from one farm. And then that whole chicken you have and that egg actually help fed, like, came because the veggies feed the chickens as well. And then all the waste that we collect this year feeds the garden next year as well. So it's cool to have this whole entire CSA bag. Like, man, this is the whole ecosystem right here that they've built and support each other. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, yeah. Uh, the chicken though is the highest cost of goods sold, that like the highest input because of the grain aspect, I will say. It takes, what is it, to raise one broiler costs me about $10 to $11 to raise one chicken, and that chicken could be 2 pounds, which is what is that, around a kilo, or it can go up to usually a lot of times up to 6 pounds, which is what, like two and a half
About
kilos.
that 2.5
Yeah,
kilos. Yeah.
yeah. And so, and it doesn't matter how small or big, they cost me $12 at the end.
Mm.
We sell our poultry at about around 650 a pound. So that's what makes it, in the extra work that we do. Um,
Okay.
it makes it pretty profitable for us to
So,
do it. Yeah. And then being able to operate under our poultry license that we currently have, which is ran by the state. So FDAX, which is Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, they have their limited poultry license, which goes to that federal exemption. So that, because I know some places around the world and even some states, the government regulations are so strict that it makes it hard for the farmers to be able to
The
raise
avian
and
flu,
process.
the avian flu is horrible in
Yeah,
Europe. Like, I mean,
yeah.
again, it's these regulations that only affect big farms. They don't affect small farms. And if
And
they
that's
do
the
affect a small
problem.
farm,
Yeah.
it's if they do affect a small farm, like yeah, one chicken's gonna be sick, but not all of them. It's like
Correct.
diseases, like it's like in us humans. I mean, if you have the immune system strong enough to, deflect that, well, you're not gonna be sick. It's just what it is. The sickness is just
Yes,
not just contagious to everybody. So
correct. Because
it's
it's a stress
like
response.
it's
Each
ridiculous.
individual is different. You don't know what the
Hmm.
stressor on that
Yeah,
individual of what they're
exactly,
capable of doing.
exactly. And I mean,
Yeah.
it is gonna be a stressed chicken that's gonna get the avian flu. And I mean, yeah.
Because
Anyway, it's
there
always
must it's a
yeah.
stressed chicken because it's not in its natural environment. It's in
Also,
a
on top of
confinement.
that,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, it's just a little bit ridiculous. I mean, I guess in the US it's a little bit less strict because I know in
yeah,
general it's more liberal. But like
yeah,
for us, yeah, Europe is just really crazy. Like, I mean, you need a I think you need a tag for every single chicken that you have now, some crap like that. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not entirely sure of the whole
yeah,
regulations there, but anyway,
yeah.
um, would you mind just sharing a little bit of like your numbers about profitability on your farm?
Yeah. Here I could actually let me pull this up to be a little more. Um, so it's also the numbers too, and I'll share my numbers eventually, but we also live a pretty modest lifestyle as well. Like we're not living a very elaborate. I don't think anybody getting into farming is living a very extravagant lifestyle, but to each is their own. I feel like I live in a very extravagant lifestyle and having this abundance all around me. And this is what we cultivate. I don't need silver and gold and all the other material stuff. Obviously, some material stuff for the farm and makes things easier, but yeah, slow and steady. And I started this farm too originally with no financial backing. Starting with our first urban farm, putting in $2,000, and then the money that we generated from that and the equipment eventually carried over to this farm. But we always put money back into the farm. But right now, our farm generates where it's at now. We're and this is the majority of it is coming from the vegetable production, I will say. I want to say about 80% of it is the veggie production still. Um, and then I'm not putting in the numbers of what I get from the design and consultation because I also do some management elsewhere. But farm wise, where we're at with a half acre, we're 2.5 acres of productivity, but a half acre of that is mostly where the veggies are being produced. We generate 100, we did 120K, 120,000 US this last year. My goal with this farm at 2.5 acres with the poultry, fruit, and nursery is to at least hit about 200 to 250K. So 225K would be like the most sweet spot for me to hit to be able to do it. I don't really pay myself. I take what I need for the farm. I also do live on the farm though. Next season I am starting to be able to plan. But for the most part, this farm can operate around 80 labor hours of a very skilled, determined individual. You can do 80 labor hours, no more than 100 labor hours. And that fluctuates over the years because some parts of the years it goes down a bit, your workload dwindles down to about maybe 60 labor hours, and this is collectively, this is
Wait,
not just
wait,
me
but
putting say
collectively, it's not just
yeah
you.
yeah, correct,
Okay.
collectively,
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Cool, cool.
just to clarify that, like on a weekly basis, collectively on a weekly basis you're looking at anywhere between, and it fluctuates, 60 to 100 hours collectively,
Hmm.
and depending on the time. So that's why typically I just say about 80 labor. So that's the two full-time people working on the farm
Hmm.
on a weekly
Hmm.
basis, essentially. Or you have one full-time and two part-timers on the farm on two and a
Hmm.
half acres is possible.
Yeah. Okay. I
Um,
wasn't sure if it
yeah.
was collective
No,
because I
no,
was
no.
just
It is
like in
collective. No, no,
America,
no.
it's
Sorry.
different standards
No,
of labor.
no. Yeah, we the labor here in America is awful.
Yeah, yeah. No.
We do have a very yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways, we don't need to go
yeah,
into that,
yeah, 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 of
but
course.
it's collective. It's
Hmm.
collective. So
Okay.
right now, most of my labor is through people working pro bono, volunteered through apprenticeship. Each of my apprentices, I asked them to at least put 1 7 hour day a week, and then me working in the back end. And that doesn't include me doing the back end stuff. This is just the physical labor of maintaining the farm. There's still, you know how it is being an entrepreneur and a business individual. There's still a lot of stuff on the back end, marketing, emails, whatever, all the nonsense that comes with running. I don't want to say nonsense. This is the essentials, I guess, of running a business. And but yeah, so right now we're at 120K is what we gross last year. And I'm hoping, and where I'm working towards, because that doesn't include when I get avocados coming in. I'm still about, well, now I have to replant. We lost a lot in the freeze. And that goes back into, I still got veggies, and if I was
Hmm.
just focusing on agroforestry and perennials for
Hmm.
income, that I would have been like, okay, cool. I just lost all the mangoes I planted last year, and also avocados I planted 3 years ago. Some of them got burnt out from the freeze. Picking the so
Hmm.
yeah. Anyways, as a fruit farmer, it would have been a huge loss, and I'm like, and you're not making money and the stress of that. But then
Yeah.
again, the workload is much different though, because when you're doing veggies, your workload's much higher. Livestock is a little bit lower and more manageable. So that's where it comes into context of like lifestyle of what works, like how much hours do you want to put into the week. Like maybe you can be a fruit and animal and do livestock and still be a great profitable farm. Would be an option. But yeah, anyways, so hopefully that kind
Hmm.
of shares
Sure,
a little
sure,
bit of
sure.
the
No,
profitability. Yeah,
yeah, okay. That's awesome that you're being so transparent about that. Like, it's great to just
yeah.
get kind of have an idea.
But that also
And
depends because that number can increase too, depending on crop selection, your market,
mm,
and that's only relevant to my context and my market and where I'm at.
yeah, and it
Where you're
depends
at,
how
depending where you want.
intensively you're also growing and all that. I suppose it's a
Correct.
lot of
Yeah,
things.
and what crop selection you're doing, like
Yeah,
it's more profitable grow baby greens than it is a tomato. You're gonna make more
yeah,
money off a 50-foot bed of greens than you are on tomatoes in a short period of time. But there's more labor that goes into the baby greens because the more tools and infrastructure
hmm,
behind it than it is growing tomatoes. So
yeah,
that's where having that balance of crop selection, where the market is for a certain, what the market's willing to pay for these certain crops. So there's so many little nuances behind that
yeah,
aspect.
yeah,
So
for sure. Well, yeah, no, it's just really cool to hear all the logistics of this all. And I just want to ask you one more question, and we'll just wrap it
mhm.
up.
Yeah,
Like, what kind of advice would you give, like, to, let's say, a beginner who's starting with Syntropic Ag that is kind of in the same process as yourself, like 7 years ago, like starting with a
yeah.
farm? What kind of advice would you give to your old
Oh,
self, let's say?
yeah, man, don't be afraid to fail. That's one thing for sure. Um, man, so the advice would be to really think through of what you want out of it. Like you sit down and it's like context, like what are you trying to achieve here? Do you have a financial goal? You have a personal goal? Are you just trying to feed yourself? Are you trying to feed your community? You really need to reflect because those once you figure out your context and you go these whole list of questions to ask yourself then the decision of planting makes it easier. The decision of farm designing makes this easier. If you don't have a focus or a clarity of where you want to be, um, you're gonna come through some obstacles because you're not clear enough of how to make and navigate through these big decisions through your whole entire journey and even through growing. So in the sense of somebody trying to come into this as an entrepreneur of making this a livelihood, you need to figure out that if you're coming into syntropic agroforestry as like just to regenerate the land and enhance your ecosystem, it's going to be different. So I have to, I need a little more context of who I'm talking to. But if talking to myself, man,
Yeah,
it
no,
would
if
be
you were
like
talking to
being more
yourself, yeah.
yourself. If I was talking to myself, uh, patience and more clarity. I wish I had a little more clarity, but then again, sometimes you don't know until you start going through this journey because then you're like, certain things present yourself, and then you realize, like, oh man, I don't actually like growing this, or I don't like doing this, or doing this enterprise is actually awful. Maybe market gardening's not for me, and but I really enjoy chicken and fruits and stuff like that, and then do that. So, but being afraid not to fail and also being keeping an open mind and not being dogmatic because even in the beginning too I was pretty dogmatic on some things but then I realized like nah why am I being dogmatic like there
Hmm.
nothing's rigid nothing in nature is rigid everything is nothing in nature is in a box and sometimes we like to keep putting things into a box so
Hmm. Yeah.
um yeah but
Okay. Okay.
yeah
Well,
man
awesome. Well,
yeah
man, that was a really, really interesting interview, and I really like the fact
yeah
that, yeah, no, you were just diving in all the logistics there. That's super cool. Yeah, by the way, I'll just add your links in the description.
yep
Also your Instagram. I don't know if you have a website. Do you have a website?
yep I do have a
Yeah,
website
I'll put these both on the description. And
cool
yeah, man, that was a quite good one. I'm sure
yeah
like we could get going a second time because
I
it
know, man, and
triggered
I,
more
I still want
questions,
to
you
go through
know?
all the trick. Yeah, I
So
would like to answer all the
let's see
questions.
for another time for that.
Yeah,
But
that'll be awesome.
so far,
Yeah,
this will do.
yeah, it
So
was a pleasure. Yeah,
yeah,
it was this
was
was
a pleasure.
absolute pleasure. Yeah, true pleasure. Yeah.